Hello my fellow developers, I'm glad that you decided to use Postgres. That's why I will show you how to start the database in a Docker container and then how to connect to that container from the PSQL tool that is part of every Postgres distribution or from your favorite SQL tool that runs on your host operating system. And then we will finish by creating a sample application and we will see how to connect from that application when it runs on your host operating system or when it runs as a container. So let's not waste a minute and do a deep dive. When you start with Postgres in Docker for the very first time, I encourage you following these two extra steps in the very beginning. The first step is create a custom Docker network. For that, Docker network create command is the way to go, and I will name this network as my network. Why would you do this? When you start your Postgres container on this network and then you start your applications on the same network, then all the containers will be able to talk to each other easily. Okay, so the next step is create a directory on your host operating system that will be used as a volume by your Postgres container. I will be using the make_dir command and the name of my directory would be Postgres volume. Postgres will be keeping all the logs and data on this location, and that will let you see all the logs easily, and also whenever you recreate your container from scratch, you will not lose any data. Two extra steps are done. Now we are ready to start Postgres in Docker. For that, all we need to do is to use this docker run command. Give a name to your Postgres container. I will name it as Postgres, nothing sophisticated. Also, I want this container to run on the network that we created a few steps back. And then you can provide some extra custom parameters. For instance, that's gonna be my Postgres username. Also, you can change the password. That's gonna be my password. Don't do this in production. You need to use a stronger password. That's obvious. Then Postgres by default listens on this port number, and I want this port number to be visible on my host operating system. Then we are providing this volume that we created, and finally provide the version of your Docker image. I am using version 16.1, that's the latest at the time of this recording. But if needed, you can always change it to the latest. Everything is ready, let's click enter. You can see that the latest version was not available, it was downloaded, and right now the container should be running on my machine. Let's check it. Docker container ls. Wonderful. Postgres is up and running, and now we can connect to it. How about we connect to the Postgres container using the PSQL tool? And no worries, you don't need to install it. It's packaged with every Postgres distribution. For that, let's clean this screen for now and use the docker exec command to connect to your Postgres container. Once connected, start the PSQL tool. Use the Postgres as the username. That's all you need to do. And you are in. You are connected to your Postgres instance. Now, if you run the /d command, you will see that we don't have any tables or any other relations. And it's easy to fix. How about we create a sample table for our little experiments? Our sample table will be storing pizza orders. That's why it's going to be named pizza order. And it will have two columns. The first one is order ID of the integer type. And the second is pizza type of the text type. All right, the table is ready. And how about we generate some sample data set? For that, I'm going to use this common table expression that will provide me with 4 different pizza types like 4 cheese, margherita, veggie, pepperoni. And then I will be using the generate series function to insert 1000 orders in my database. Let's run this function, and you can see that we inserted 1000 pizza orders. Now, if you repeat the /d command, you will see that you have this table. Let's do select from pizza order limit 5. And here, as you can see, the first 5 orders that were placed in the database. So that was the first step. We managed to start Postgres in a Docker container, and then we used the PSQL tool to connect to this container and play it with some sample data set. Now, I want us to connect to the same database, but using a SQL tool that runs on your host operating system. My go-to SQL tool is DBeaver. It's already running on my host operating system. All I need to do is to open a new database connection. And as you guess, Postgres is at the top of the list. Pick it. Next, you remember when we were starting our Postgres container, we exposed the port 5432 on the host operating system. It means that right now I can connect from DBeaver by using the local host as the host name and this port number. Nothing needs to be changed. Then we will connect to the Postgres database, that's the default one. So the username is set to Postgres, and we use the same username when we were starting our container. As for the password, we use the password for the container. Everything is ready. Let's test our connection. You can see that DBeaver successfully connected to my Postgres that runs in Docker, and that's the server configuration. We are ready to open this connection. It's opened. How about we explore the database objects? We are going to the public schema, and under this public schema you will find this pizza order table that we created previously using the psql tool. Now let me run a simple SQL request. Select all from pizza order, limit 5. We've got the first orders that were placed in our table. That's how easy you can connect from your SQL tool that runs on your host operating system to your Postgres Docker container. And final step, how about we create a sample application and try to connect from that sample application to our Dockerized Postgres instance. Jumping back to my terminal window, I no longer need this PSQL connection. Let's shut it down. Let's create this application. I will create this application in the following directory, cool app. Let's go under this cool app. That's going to be a Node.js application, but you feel free to use the language of your choice. I'm going to use their npm init command to initialize the project. Done. And after that, I will use npm install pg. PG stands for the Postgres driver, so that's what I want to add to my application. How about we open the app using the Visual Studio? For that, use the code command. And here we are. Yes, I trust myself. The node modules, so the package.json file. Next, I will create the main.js file. In this file, first, I will import the PG module. That's the Postgres driver for Node. The next step is to provide the database configuration. Let's create the config object. We need to provide the host name. It's localhost. Next, the port number. If you remember, the port number was 5432. The database name we want to connect to is Postgres. As for the username, we picked Postgres as well. And as for the password was password. Done. The configuration is ready. How about we create some sample logic? I will have just one function. The function uses our configuration to connect to the database. Once the connection is opened, we will run the following query that calculates the total number of orders for every pizza type. Once the data is sent back from the database, we will print this information in a terminal window, and then we will terminate the connection. The last step is we need to execute this function in our application logic. Done. Next, I want to use Node main.js to run it, and you can see the result that was generated for our SQL request. This time, the application instance was running on my host operating system, but still it managed to connect to Postgres that runs in Docker by using the localhost as the host name and the following port number. But what if I want to run this application in a Docker container as well? Then how this application will be able to find and connect to Postgres? Let's figure this out. The first step is you need to create the Docker file for your application, where you provide all the information needed to create a Docker image for your app. In the beginning, you will find the essential steps that you do for a Node.js app, and in the end, you are telling Docker that once the container is up and running, please start this application logic. Done. The cool thing about Docker and about that custom network that we created in the beginning is that if you run the Postgres container and the application container on the same network, then you can use the Postgres container name in your host configuration, and that way the application will be able to open a connection with your database instance. Alright, how do you find the name of your Postgres container? First, you provided it when you were executing the docker run command. If you forgot about that name, then jump back to your terminal and run docker container ls, and you will find the name of your container. It's Postgres. Let's copy it. Jumping back to our source code and updating the host name here. That's it. That's all you need to do. Now, let's build our image for the application. Jumping back to the terminal window and executing the docker build command. Let's name this image as my cool app. Alright, the image has been built. It will take a few seconds. It's ready. The final step is we need to run this image as a container on the same network where we have the Postgres instance running, and that's it. The application started in the container successfully, it managed to connect to Postgres, and it returned the details for the request that we had in our application logic. Job done. How do you like this, my friend? Isn't it cool? It took us a few minutes to get started with Postgres and Docker, and then to learn how to connect to that Postgres Docker container from various SQL tools and the application that run on your host operating system or within your containerized environment. And by the way, in the description to this video, you will find all the instructions that I used in today's tutorial, so find them and reproduce all the steps on your end. And keep mastering databases, my friend. Stay tuned for the new videos. Bye bye now.